hope that this is going to maybe give you some new ideas or help give you some more efficient ways to think about practicing tone and technique. We have a lot of different exercises for you, and we'll walk you through as much as we can. Stefania is going to present first on tone, and then we'll shift into the technical portion for the second half. And then after that, we're going to do a Q&A. We figured it might be easiest just to get through all the material first. So if you want, please drop your questions and comments in the chat throughout the presentation, but we'll mainly be addressing like any general questions and comments at the end. If there are questions about any exercises we're doing throughout the presentation, like if you're not sure like how to do it or exactly what we're asking for, put that in the chat and we will try and answer that so you can continue to follow along with us.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions on that?
No.
Otherwise, I'm going to let Stefania kind of go from here.
Perfect. Thank you, James. Just like our presentation is revisiting tone and technique, we wanted to do a little introduction on how this kind of came about and our interest in creating these presentations. You can go ahead and share that. So we did some peer teaching research together in the summer of 2021, where we exchanged lessons focusing on skills that the teacher had a strength in, but the student had a weakness in. So for myself, I studied with James and learned about technique because my finger technique just didn't feel as stable as it should have been for the level of education I've had. And James worked on tone with myself. And you know, we wanted to kind of see what the benefits of professional lesson exchange were, and then develop those skills that we both saw a strength in each other's playing. So as far as our method, we did 8 weeks of private lessons, and these were very collaborative lessons. So it wasn't just teacher teaching student, it was assessing how are these methods working for the person and whether or not we needed to tweak it, or, you know, we kind of dove into really difficult questions of, you know, really fine-tuning our methods that we've created that we're presenting today. Do you have anything you would like to add?
Yeah, so in addition to the method portion, there are a lot of methods out there for practicing tone and technique. The ones we're presenting today are not exhaustive by any means, and we don't want to say that these are better or worse. These are just the ones that we found to be the most effective and the most efficient in kind of long-term progress and also sustaining those skills long-term. And so that's kind of where this is coming from. We've also tried these methods with other students outside of our original study. So we've put these into practice, and as far as we've seen, these continue to hold up as our most effective teaching methods. So yeah, we also do recognize that it was a very unique situation, being how close we are as friends. We've known each other for over 15 years, which has been fun. And so that did give us a level of trust to kind of dive into some history of how we also learn about tone and technique, and how we could just continue to improve on the great things that we did learn throughout our education from our different teachers and from the different materials out there. So,
Perfect.
shall we continue?
Yeah.
All right.
So we're going to get into long tone fundamentals today for my portion. So I just wanted to go over some common long tone exercises and methods that I often see either used or I've used myself. So one of them is Moises de la Sonorite, which are the long chromatic descending passages starting on the B above the staff. We've got Trevor Wise Tone Book 1, which covers harmonics first, and then we've got melodic phrases, and those are also great. We focus in the lower registers there, and we descend a half step down from about low G on the staff. Another long tone exercise is hairpins, where we're expanding dynamic contrast. as well as long tones where the emphasis is on how long can you play a note, where it's more focused on a duration. Maybe that includes the hairpin, and then another one is using the tuner, seeing if you keep it on the green. Those are some of the methods I often hear about and see and have observed in teaching and just in method books, in articles. And we'll just go over the next slide. Thank you. About how effective these exercises are. So De La Sonorite, it begins in the upper register and descends, and it's a very long exercise. You're supposed to repeat both exercises once, so it really, like starting high B, going all the way down to low C, it takes a long time, and I find that it is very tiresome for, to do that whole lengthy exercise. For Trevor Y, harmonics, they're a great way to explore different ranges and get into the middle register and upper registers. And the descending melodic passages, I find that when I am trying to work on just my sound and my tone, adding melodic phrases, I get distracted by color choice, I get distracted by musical phrasing and dynamic choices that I'm making in those moments, and I'm no longer focusing on what sound am I truly producing in the moment. Hairpins, I think, are a great tool, and it's actually one of the tools I do use in my long tone method, but it's split up a little bit and is not the first exercise. It's a great way of achieving dynamic contrast, but it does not help solidify a solid foundation to expand on. A hairpin to me is kind of expanding your range beyond the just base of your playing. Duration, I think duration changes depending on the range you're playing, the dynamic you're playing. So long tone duration exercises can be great to kind of see how long you can go, but in context, a lot of different aspects affect what that duration capability actually is. And then as far as the tuner can be helpful, especially in long tones, but it can also be restricting. There's a couple of different ways we view intonation in playing, both in just intonation, so chord structure that you find when you're playing in ensembles or with piano, and then equal temperament, which is what a tuner does, where it's exact measurements. And both can be very helpful, but a tuner doesn't allow you to develop your own ear and hear the sound that you're producing and allow you to kind of explore a deep dive into your sound. So the benefits to kind of taking it back a step and kind of really just going with simple exercises, you get to focus on just the sound that you are producing. And then you can develop an understanding of overtones, which the flute is built off of that series. So we've got the bass fundamental sound, so like for instance the low D, and when you produce an overtone, it's a resulting tone that sounds like a tiered whisper. You've got your octave overtone, which is like a mildly loud whisper, the fifth, which will sound next, which is a little quieter, and then your third, which is a very, very gentle whisper if you can get it. So you can help develop your understanding and ability to hear them by kind of pairing back to just very basic exercises. We often hear about the third ear, listening for the third ear, kind of you hear what you can play up here, but then expanding to hear outside in front of you is the third ear. And using these exercises, you can help develop the difference between hearing up here what you're playing and kind of what is the audience hearing, or what are people hearing out in front of you. Another benefit is kind of just focusing on how comfortable is it to play in these ranges, and really just dive into anything that's uncomfortable, that's straining, and developing whether or not that needs to change or just needs to be built to be a stronger base for you. And then this can also help develop your understanding of intonation, and these exercises are meant to minimize the length and duration of your tone work. So I believe this exercise at max is going to be 30 minutes for it. Yes, we can go to the next slide. So these are the 3 sections we are going to cover today for our exploration of tone. I do want to emphasize a lot of this will be like personal exploration and kind of diving into what you like in your sound, what you want to hear, what you want to produce, and really refining that to execute that every time you play. So our first exercise is going to be just the long tone, and it's going to be a 1-note long tone. There's no duration expectation, dynamic expectation, anything like that. It's just 1 note. Our second exercise is going to be hairpins, but we're going to break them down into 2 different groups. We're going to do a diminuendo or decrescendo hairpin, and then a hairpin that starts from where our decrescendo ends and grows from there. And then the last exercise is going to be ascending. So it's going to be broken down into 2 exercises as well, developing through the range and then developing through other ranges such as the middle register and upper register. So our first exercise is going to be a long tone. And I recommend starting on your low D as your fundamental note to build your sound off of. If low D is not most comfortable, I would choose a note that's either low G or lower. And then you would just breathe as necessary whenever you feel like you need to take a breath. And really, you're gonna just sit and observe what you're hearing, what your sound is. I'll do a little demonstration about, kind of what you're gonna go for. Stop. You'll observe while you're playing what you like, what you don't like. Is it comfortable? Is it producing the sound that you like? Is there anything you want to work on? And then you're going to select one aspect that you would like to work on or like to change or try to change, whether there is everything you like and it's, well, I want to go for a different tone color, but you're going to pick one aspect to improve on. So if everyone who has a flute by them would like to just play a low D or whatever your lowest comfortable note is, we'll just give you a couple of minutes to kind of just sit with that note and just let you make your observations. So go ahead whenever you are all ready. All right, so we've spent some time just playing the low D, kind of assessing. So now I would like you to repeat it with that one piece, that one excerpt or aspect that you want to focus on to allow yourself to kind of just sit with that aspect, try to improve it, or whatever aspect of your focus is. Oftentimes, I just am trying to find where my true center is so that I can hear those overtones. So I'll give you another minute to try that as well. Perfect. So this is the first and like really the bulk of your exercise is going to be spending your time exploring this one note until you have explored it to its depth, which from my experience is an endless exploration. You're constantly learning something new, developing something new, kind of deciding different things about different things, trying different things out to see what you like, and really refining that, that skill. So we'll go on to the next exercise for now, which are going to be the split hairpins. So I've split up the hairpins so that we can isolate different aspects of what the hairpin does for us. The first is a decrescendo. Since we're starting with a bass where there's no expectation of a dynamic or duration or anything like that, I think a diminuendo is a great way to kind of help develop the skill to get quieter and softer. So we're just going to play a decrescendo hairpin and just end where it ends and observe how soft can we get, how quickly does that decrescendo happen, do we want it to be longer, shorter. There's all sorts of exploration you can do in this moment to kind of dive into how this happens. Does your tone color change? So I'll demonstrate and I'll give everyone a chance to try it on their own. So I kind of jumped into like a harmonic, so I might focus the next time on not doing that. But I'll give everyone a moment to kind of try that exercise on your own. There's no expectation of how quiet you get. It's just a diminuendo that you're going to sit and observe. All right, so you're just going to observe, you're going to repeat just like we do with the long tones until you have oh, thank you, James. Until it's very comfortable and you like what that first diminuendo or decrescendo hairpin does. The next hairpin is going to be a crescendo hairpin, and this is going to come off immediately after your decrescendo hairpin, and the goal is to start exactly where that last hairpin ended. So I'll demonstrate and I'll give everyone a moment to try it. So I'm going to do the decrescendo hairpin and then restart after a breath with the crescendo hairpin. So my goal is to kind of start wherever my decrescendo ended to see if I have the control to be able to start the same place I'm able to get to. So I'll give everyone a couple of moments to try that on their own. All right, so this is the second exercise to kind of develop that tone and that foundation. We're starting off with the foundation, just the individual note, and building just that sound, and then we're expanding on different dynamics. Maybe you're trying different tone colors and those dynamics, but we're kind of really isolating those different moments so that we don't overwhelm our practice with too many options to choose from. And then we're going to go on to our third exercise, which is going to be ascending to our different ranges or within our range. So I've broken it down into 3 different sections, which is going to be within the range. So I recommend starting with the lower register because it is the fundamental base of the flute sound and the structure of the Overtone series. So I would recommend starting to ascend by half step once you feel very comfortable with your low D. You can pick up your flute, play that low D. You can place it exactly where you want that D. And then you'll just see how different that low D from your low E flat is, because sometimes it can be very striking how much that half step can change for you. So you'll kind of explore those moments. So to give you an example of how I would utilize the first exercise and the second exercise to ascend within the range, I'm going to start with my low D to see where it is. Then I'm going to play an E flat to see where that is. And then I'm going to assess, are they similar? Do they have a similar sound quality, a similar tone quality, or color? Does the color change too much that it doesn't feel like it's part of the same cohesive sound? And I'm going to pick an aspect to repeat that and kind of use the D as a fundamental base to build the rest of my range off of. I'll give everyone a moment to try just the low D and the low E flat for yourself to see how similar or different it is for you. All right, so that's how I would develop and expand into the range of the lower register and help create that same stability both within my playing, the physicality of playing, the comfort of that physicality, as well as developing to have a consistent similar sound throughout. And if I wanted to expand on different colors, I would do the same thing where I focus on a specific color through the range and use the same long tone exercises to kind of help develop those. To move to the middle and upper register, it's going to be very similar between the two. I usually ascend by octave, so I'd start on my low D and kind of get my basis of there, and then I would play the middle D, or sometimes I'll play a harmonic to see if they're really similar. And then from there, go a half step up and a half step down to kind of use the middle D as my bass, or for the upper register, the high D as kind of a little bit of a bass, to then move to other notes to help create that stability within the range. So overall, eventually the entire range gets the same stability, similar color, so that when you do a scale, it sounds like the same note is being played, just different pitches. So I'll do a little example of what it would be like to shift to the middle register, and I'll give you a moment as well to try that. So again, I'm going to start on the low D and then go up to the middle E and kind of just assess between low register and middle register where that's sitting. Again, you just continue to make your observations of what you like, what is comfortable, is there too much physical movement, does it feel uncomfortable, what do you need to adjust or try to adjust to make that easier or more comfortable for yourself. So I'll give you a couple of moments to try that exercise as well. All right, so just to give you a couple of questions to help guide your practice as you develop your tone, you want to kind of ask yourself, what is different when you restart it, or as you decrescendo or crescendo or change notes? And then what do you like that you are hearing? I think that's always a great question to kind of assess when you are hearing a bunch of different things in your playing, and if you want to focus on what you like to help guide you to develop your control and your sound. And then one of the other great things to ask is, do I have control? Is the sound getting away from me? Am I not able to execute what I would like to? And how can I explore via these exercises that type of control? So I do want to ask, because James, I taught James these tone exercises. Do you have any one or two takeaways from the experience of these exercises?
Yeah, so I guess just a very brief background. While tone, like some had commented for years that I had a nice sound, control was something that I've always struggled with, and also consistency from day to day. And sometimes it felt like I would have to warm up for 30 or 40 minutes. And so I was really surprised by the simplicity of these exercises. Stefania talked about a lot of the tone method books at the very beginning, and I'd used those a lot and worked through them. But the most effective exercise for me was the first one, just playing one long tone. And the best advice that she gave me that helped is stick with it for a long period of time, in terms of like, trust that process of it developing and how your ears are going to develop, how the muscles are going to develop. I stayed on a B natural in the staff actually for a few weeks, and then that helped me hear what tonal center really was for me. I really trained my ears in a different way. And then I moved down to low G. I spent another few weeks on that, and that's when I started to hear overtones a little differently. And then I gradually moved down to low D, which has now become my foundation. And now I do a low D for 3 to 5 minutes every day. I've been doing it for over a year now. And I feel way more grounded. And it does feel very simple, but I'm still learning a lot. And I'm way more confident in my sound production. Bad days don't really happen anymore. There are still days that are less comfortable, but I wouldn't say I have a day that is so far off from my tonal center now. And so stick with the process and let your ears kind of change as your muscles are developing. Let your ears grow and go through their own process as your muscles do. And it's okay that it's really simple. I don't know if we mentioned this. We both have doctorates from Michigan State University. Mm-hmm. So I've gone through a lot of education, learned a lot. And I think what you'll find also in my presentation is that the simplest exercise, at least in tone, is still the most effective in many ways, mm-hmm. because you're getting at just the basic development of what is going on and then how do you maintain that long term.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for teaching me.
Yeah.
It really has changed my life. So
I'm glad. Yeah, so that's the end of my portion. Just like James mentioned, I do really want to emphasize that first long tone exercise is really the bulk of it. Until there is that, very comfortability that you're mentioning. It's not a discouragement to try the other methods, but moving on too quickly can actually distract you from being able to really get that foundational basis where you are feeling fully comfortable majority of every day you play. But with that, we'll move on to finger technique with James.
Cool. You just made me think I want to add one more thing, which is, though I still do my low D every day and it's been a year, I am working in the middle and high register now too. I'm not just doing the first long tone exercise, and that's been my whole progress. I'm doing the hairpin work and I'm moving up the registers. But I tried at one point like not doing that low D as much, and I just noticed how it just wasn't as helpful when I moved away from that. So I went back and I just continued going at that low D. and it just sets me up well for the rest of the day. And it actually, to Stefania's credit, I now use these exercises as the basis of my tone teaching when I work with undergraduate students, and they have also discovered the same things, and many of them are doing their low Ds every day now. So,
awesome. Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, no, of course. And then we'll move over to finger technique with James.
Yeah, so if you can just give me just a moment as I pull up the next PowerPoint. And I think Jet has put in the so there's a PDF in the chat with just kind of the foundation of all of my tools for technique. It's not an exact replica of the PowerPoint, but it gives you the basic idea, so that way you can just kind of focus on enjoying the presentation a little bit more. Oh, wrong way. There we go. Okay, so I do want to, so we've got 25 minutes left. I want to be clear that I have done this as a workshop before, and my preference is to have like 75 or 90 minutes to go through the entirety of the variations of all of these tools, because there's a lot of different ways to use them. But we're gonna break it down into like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and give you a really kind of foundational guide for how I use these. So the plan for today is I'll talk very briefly about the origins of how I kind of came across these. We'll go through all the tools, how to put them into a technique method. So it's not just 7 different exercises that you use whenever, but it's a complete method that I've kind of designed. And then we'll talk about briefly about the process. I'll have Stefania share a little bit about her experience studying these with me. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of time, I hope, at the end to kind of come up with your own technique goals for moving forward. And if not, you can take a picture of that slide and then kind of think of your goals later on. But for now, I would love for everyone to put up like a little like or heart sign if this resonates or has ever resonated with you when working on any sort of technique. Can I just see like, yes, thank you. 1, 2, 3. I appreciate the laughing face. Yes, this is not, oh yeah, we're seeing them all over. Excellent. And not excellent as in like, I'm so glad you struggle. Excellent as like, I'm not the only one, right? Many of us have experienced this. So that is where I started in 2015. So practice time, I was a freelancer in Chicago. My practice time was getting much more limited and sometimes scattered throughout the day. I was getting a lot harder repertoire and I was having to learn it a lot faster. So this was becoming a problem. Like, how do I manage all this? I needed a more stable foundation. I need to learn it quickly. And I was also realizing I wanted a clearer method for my students. And at the time I was teaching ages 8 through 18, as well as adult flutists. So I was working with a wide range, but I was like, how do I come up with a clear, effective method? So I started investing really strongly in my own technique. And I explored really intensely for 2 years, which has a lot of stories and twists and turns, but we won't get to those today. But this method is a compilation of exercises that I've actually learned from other people or books, but I have organized them into a very specific way. And so that's kind of how I'm putting my own interpretation on all these exercises. And I find this to be the most beneficial and effective way to work through technique. Of course, there are many other ways to practice technique. There are tons of books out there, and many of them are very helpful as well. These are just what I find to be the most effective, beyond even just like practicing our technique routines, but also how do you learn repertoire? How do you learn your etudes? So these tools work for any genre, piece, any skill level. I've used them with beginners within the first few months. They're not intended to give you perfect technique, but rather a way to think about technique and help you be curious when you're working on your technique and ask you questions to help you really move forward and develop it. So these tools are going to help you strengthen your aural skills as well as your kinesthetic awareness, and will hopefully help you to work through really intense and uniquely hard passages. And of course, I'm not trying to make anyone a robot, but the goal of having great technique, hopefully, is to free you up from the technical kind of concerns so that you can focus more on what you're trying to express with the music. So I've divided the 7 tools into 2 sections. The first are the foundational tools, and they are listed in a very specific order because they get progressively more advanced in the skills that you're working with. And then the other 3 are supplementary tools when the first 4 haven't quite solved a passage. And that's really important. You're going to notice the 3 supplementary are not numbered, and that's because they don't work for every type of passage, and you kind of have to use your own discretion and exploration to figure out which ones are the most helpful. So we're going to talk through each of them. You're going to get a chance to try some of them briefly. If you have brought a piece of music, or like 2 measures or 1 measure, or even a scale, you can explore those. I'll also have some examples on each slide. And let's go. So the first tool, the say and finger technique. This is a really basic technique that's often used with beginners, and I actually find it really helpful even as a professional flutist. I learned this from a dear friend of mine who's a band director. What's great about it is it develops the connection between your brain, like what you're reading, and how you're physically working through the music. And it takes out the need for tone production and lip flexibility, so that way you can just focus on reading and getting your fingers aligned. There's a couple great benefits in terms of working with accidentals, challenging key signatures, new fingerings, things like that. So pull out your piece of music. The exercise is very simple. You're going to select a small group of notes like these 2 measures here, and you're going to say the note names out loud while you finger them, and do not worry about the rhythm. We don't care about the rhythm. We're just working on reading the note and fingering it. So, for example, the first measure for me, I've got my flute here, go F sharp, A sharp, oh, it's in C sharp minor. So F sharp, A sharp, oh, tiny screen, G sharp, C sharp, G double sharp, G natural, A sharp, G natural, G double sharp, F sharp, A sharp, E natural. And that's the exercise, and I would do it multiple times until I can comfortably read it. Because if you're trying to read the music and you can't, there's already a disconnect there. So trying to play through it could already be quite challenging. So I want you to just take a minute and, you can either try it with this measure or your music and just explore what that's like. Great. So Stefania was just doing the second measure of it over here. And it's really important to make sure that you say the sharps, double sharps, or if naturals are coming back. It helps you read it rather than just saying, oh, everything here is a G. Well, it's not. And we need to know that we're reading a G natural, G sharp, G flat, whatever. young kids, just from a teaching perspective, young kids will want to say the enharmonic if that's a little easier. For example, instead of saying A sharp, they might want to say B flat, because that's the note name they might see more regularly. Make sure they say A sharp, because this is how you become fluent in reading in other keys and other accidentals. Okay, so tool number 2, 1 note per click. I learned this from Aaron Goldman, the principal flutist of the National Symphony Orchestra. He just led a wonderful 50th anniversary convention. Shout out to him. Thank you, Aaron Goldman, in Chicago. So this is a really simple exercise. You turn the metronome on to 72 and you play 1 note per click. And so again, I don't even know what I have. Here we go. So again, you're ignoring the rhythm because now you can read the notes, you know that you can, and your fingers are you're reading and lining up your fingers, but now we're trying to add in some sound. So this is a really challenging measure from Chaminade's concertino that I know many players and students have had. It's at the bottom of the 2nd page, and I'll just demonstrate that. And that's it. And things I would be asking if there are little blips in the sound. So are all of my fingers moving together? And if they're not between 2 notes, which finger is being too slow? And that's an important question. Instead of saying, oh, which fingers are fast, you want your fingers to get faster. So find out which are the slow fingers and help them move forward. And sometimes I like to think of let the slow fingers lead. So make them go faster so they're almost in front of the fast fingers. So just take 30 seconds and try it with your sheet of music or with this particular excerpt. Okay, so that's 1 note per click. The 3rd tool is I am going homes, sometimes also known as back and forths, 2-note groupings. There's a couple, you see it throughout different literature. One of the first places I heard of it was from Phyllis Luke and Patricia George's Flute 101, Mastering the Basics, which is a beginner book that I just think is fabulous and I love it. And while she uses it for beginners, I thought, well, maybe I could learn something from it. And I did, and it's actually become my most used technical tool. So you just take 2 notes. It can be a large interval, it can be a half step like that's on the page, and you're just working on, are my fingers even? That's it. You're just trying to bring awareness to the finger speed and the coordination and move them really deliberately. So I like to do this one actually with scales, but maybe I'll just start with like a C to D, which often trips people up. And I'll put my fingers in. So I'm really looking for all of my fingers moving together. And I'm assessing after each time, did I hear any blips? Are any fingers slow? And right now today, L3 is being a little bit slow, so that's the one I would try and move a little bit faster. And then I'd keep developing that finger. So take a moment. Oh, and there are a couple ways you can do this. So if you're just trying to get the basics of fingerings or iron out a particular pair, don't do it with a metronome. Just work really slowly between a pair. But once you start developing your technique, you can do it with a metronome, and I'll actually do it with scales. So up and down the scale, or even faster. And again, I'm listening for, are all of my fingers moving together? For time's sake, I'm actually gonna keep moving forward for now, but give that one a try at some point. I also just want to say happy birthday, Patricia George. She turned 80 today, which is just wonderful, and she's had such an influence on us. So happy birthday. I hope she's having a wonderful day, and thank you for the inspiration. The final tool for the foundational portion is note grouping. This is a really common idea among flutists, and especially in the Western classical music world. I've heard it a lot, but I noticed that people have different meanings and uses for it, which is fine, but I'm just going to explain this is how I use it. I first learned this from Lisa Burns, my first flute teacher in Utah, and she talked about how notes lead us somewhere. They're always grouped together, and we can use them to phrase to the next beat. And so I always heard 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and I heard that for many, many years, and it still is with me. And so it is really helpful to do it that way, but I've also kind of used it to explore, like, how can we group things in different ways and help us understand, are all the groupings even? So I've just continued to expand on it. And here are a couple of examples from excerpts. So we've got Beethoven's Leonore, which is the classic 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So you're going to hold the first note and then do 3 quicker notes into the next one. So and you might notice that I'm slurring and not adding the articulations, and that's purposeful, because when you tongue something, you can hide your finger blips. But when you slur it, you're going to hear everything among your fingers. And it's a pretty honest exercise. So that's one way. You'll notice this next excerpt is from Firebird. Sometimes with like 5s and 7s, or even 6s, you can do different groupings of 3s and 2s. And so you might just explore, how do I want to do it? So if we're doing the orange version, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. That's how that could work. Or 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1 would be the pink version. And then you'll just figure out which way is easier for you to think about it, so you can play over time. So I generally, with note grouping, like to break it down into 2s, 3s, and 4s. I find those to be the most effective because there are smaller groups, and do those before you go into the 5s, 6s, and 7s. Okay, now we're into our 3 supplemental tools. So these tools, again, they're called supplemental because I haven't found them to be effective or efficient for all technical scenarios, whereas the first 4 tools, they work for everything. So having said that, these 3 tools are helpful in addition to the 4 foundational tools when those get you far, but you're still having a few little challenges. So after you've worked through those, it's quite normal to work on some supplemental and then go back and forth between the supplemental and the foundational, and that's kind of part of the process, and that's okay. But I find if you do these supplemental ones first, you risk kind of glossing over some of the gaps that are in your technique, because these are more like sort of tips and tricks rather than foundation building. So, but however, if you're in a time crunch with a concert or recital or competition or something, these 3 supplemental clues can be helpful in those last minute situations. So the first one is anchor notes, which I learned this concept from Lisa Burns again, and Gary Woodward, who's the former principal of the LA Opera, and he teaches at a few universities in throughout Los Angeles. I find flutists refer to anchor notes to mean a number of different things. Oftentimes, like, where do my fingers feel stable? Like, most of my fingers are down, such as a high E flat or a middle D. This is a totally fine interpretation of anchor notes. I have a slightly different meaning for it in my method. So my definition is anchor notes are something for our brains to latch onto as we navigate a technical passage. So it can be identifying 1 or 2 notes that need attention to stabilize our technique. It could be the note you are playing incorrectly, one that you have finger blips on, or one that does feel stable. But the goal of anchor notes is to help iron out issues that can't be solved by note grouping. And as you're looking at this exercise, so you're gonna ask maybe, what note am I getting tripped up on, or where's the phrase that I'm getting stuck? And then try that note or the note before, because often it can be the preparation. If your prep isn't good, maybe that leads to a mistake. So the second part of it is you're gonna select an anchor note to try, start at the beginning of the phrase, and then you're gonna stop on that anchor note and then keep going. And it's important to stop and then keep going because you wanna learn, how am I getting into it and how am I getting out of it? And then you're gonna do a reflection to ask, what fingers, notes, or other aspects do I need to focus on to get through it? And then mark it in the music. It might take a few notes to figure out, and it might be different. So if you and another person are playing a passage, you each might have different anchor notes, and that's okay. Here are a couple examples. I'll just do one. Alison Logan's Hole's Homeland has a really tricky little passage in measures 34 and 35 especially, and I needed different anchor notes to get through it. So I'm just gonna demonstrate this first anchor note, the C. So I'll start in measure 34, and I might go. So I stopped on the C, held it, told my fingers, like, that's the C, that's the note you're landing on. And then I kept going. And then maybe the G is the next one. And so you'll keep doing that, just figuring out how are your anchor notes working, and then hopefully that should help you. So then you can play through it, but you'll be thinking about those notes. And then you can navigate it hopefully a lot easier. So that's anchor notes. The sixth tool is the skeleton, which is about finding the melody or the important harmonic moments within a bunch of technique. It can be really helpful in shaping phrases before adding in all the little technical notes, especially if you're doing like a theme and variations. So you're just going to explore identifying potential melodic and harmonic notes and then play those as a singing melody. And then you'll play that 3 to 5 times with the phrasing you want, and before playing the music as written. So for example, the top excerpt is Dvorak, the solo from Dvorak Symphony No. 8, fourth movement. There's a lot of notes going on, but it can be helpful just to make sure you're hearing. So that when you're playing the whole thing, and then you'll lead back into the main solo. Sometimes, like in Paul Hindemith's Symphonic Metamorphosis, there's 2 anchor notes that are going. There might be, 2 skeletons that are happening simultaneously. There's this really kind of jazzy section that's many find tough because of how the slurs are marked, the groupings. So the blue one I find is the melody. then there's a second one, the red, which is the second note of each slur. So practicing those separately can just wrap our ears, and then you might put those together. So that's how I use skeleton, just to kind of get that in my ear and give me a more stability in the phrasing. So it sounds, expressive like we want it to be, and not just like an etude. All right, and the final tool is really simple. It's identifying the theory. I remember when Lisa Burns first taught me to find the C major scale in the Bach C major sonata, and it just totally opened my eyes to how the relationship between scale patterns and technique patterns and the music and etudes we're playing. So I like to look, you don't have to have a huge theory foundation. It can be really helpful, but just look for different patterns and structures that you see. And sometimes that can just help us organize our technique in a way that makes a little bit more sense. I like this tip that I put. It's okay to make, quote, unusual pattern connections that might only make sense to you. If it helps you, that's okay. I've often found things, and I'll share with a student that say, oh, I would never have thought of it that way. But that's just how I saw the music. So here's a couple things from Yuko Uebayashi's sonata for flute and piano. Let's do movement 4. She's got this really beautiful progression going on. And at first, there's just a lot of accidentals going on. And so it can be helpful to break down, well, what is happening? And so I first saw that, well, we have things grouped in slurs, and then, oh, look, there's a descending pattern, and then an ascending, and descending, and ascending. How are those broken up? And then I noticed that, well, we're in the same key for each of those. And so you just keep looking for those patterns. And so I've written out, we're in A major for the first descending group, and then it switches to D flat. And because I know my scales really well, I can just switch to the key signature much easier. So I don't have to read all the notes as being completely random to me. They're grouped in a collection that makes sense. So keep identifying your theory. And then we're just gonna kind of quickly go through this last part. There are many ways that you can use this method, but here are the main ones. So if you're just generally looking to improve your technique, I encourage you to do I am going homes on whatever you're doing. Do that for a while, like multiple days, maybe even a week or two, and then go into note grouping. You want to set all your finger blips, get those ironed out before you start doing these larger groupings. If you really want to get into intense technique improvement like I did, start with say and finger. Make sure you can do that, then go to 1 note per click for as long as you need. You can speed up the 1 note click once 72 is good. I am going homes, note grouping, and then play through. This process can take a while, but that technical foundation I found really sticks once you've gone through it. Here's an idea for if you're practicing new repertoire. After you've sight read it, because it's important to do that, then you can go through 1 note per click, I am going homes and note grouping, and then pull the supplemental tools as you need. It's also really good to have a maintenance routine. So once you have your major scales down, decide how am I going to do my major scales every day in a way that's comfortable while still maintaining something. So for example, I'm doing my chromatic scales are part of my maintenance routine. So I do them in note grouping first, and then I play them straight through. For example, and I'll do that with every chromatic scale through the entire range of the instrument. let's see. And finally, you can grab a picture of this one, embracing the process. It's gonna take time to go through this. And I'm gonna ask Stefania if she wants to share a takeaway or two about what it was like for her to do this technique process, because I've been doing it for 7 years now. So while I still learn a lot from it, it's very familiar to me. So Stefania, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so when I started this process, we started slow, starting with some say in finger for some things and going into it and creating those maintenance and improvement routines. And it really was very eye-opening on how quickly and in like a short practice time frame you could advance your technique. And I saw how I would be able to learn music so much quicker, and I reflected so much on the music that I have spent hours and hours and hours trying to advance to a particular level, and how all of these tools, especially the 4 main ones and the construction of them, will really just help solidify all of that. So once I am able to accurately and comfortably play something at one tempo and I move it up, I know that I'll always be able to go back to that other tempo and still be able to play it. It's also just stabilized my technique overall. It's so much more comfortable. And I've always been told you should be able to feel every note / hear every note in a scale when you play it in context. And after going through this process, I was able to actually hear that and execute that and feel that. And so it is very transformative, but it definitely takes time, and sometimes it's exhausting. But it's definitely well worth putting in that time, because you put it in once, and if you maintain it, it stays with you. And you don't have to go back through and redo all of the work again. Or if you do, it's less work. It's just kind of, a shorter packet of that work.
Have you found your, thank you for sharing that. Have you found the amount of time, intense work at the beginning is different than now?
Oh, yeah.
What is that process?
Yeah, so we did a lot of upfront work on kind of reviewing all of my basic fundamental technical skills, so all scales, arpeggios and stuff like that, and we really broke it down and took it slow. And now when I come back to it, it took a long time. I believe I was doing 45 minutes for maintenance / improvement.
And you were doing a lot of patterns,
I was
you don't have to do that long.
Yeah, you don't have to do it that long, but I wanted to spearhead it and get it done. So I spent the time to invest it, but now my maintenance routine is, maybe 15 minutes. And for my improvement, I choose 1 or 2 things that I want to improve, high C sharp to D for Prokofiev Classical Symphony. That's one aspect of improvement routine, and there might be one other thing, but it's so small for that improvement area that I get my maintenance done and I can move on to work on whatever I want to work on for etudes, pieces of music, audition repertoire, whatever it is I'm interested in playing. And then I have a method to learn all of that is already applicable, that I've already spent time doing, that is very easy to just go through and kind of, almost check the box, but just make sure that everything still feels good and stable. So yeah, it's really great in that you put the work in up front, and then you really see how it pays off later, in that you have less time in the future that you're working on it, or whatever time you want to devote on it. But yeah.
And these exercises don't have to take long. So if you decide I'm just going to work on my D major scale, you can do your I am going homes. Up and down, that takes 30 seconds, maybe 40 seconds. But if you're doing it correctly, really intentionally every day, you only need to do it once a day. And over time, because you're doing it intentionally and with good habits, that's going to develop well. So you don't have to spend many, 10, 20, 30 minutes on a single scale. I always found if I'm doing that, I'm not practicing it efficiently. Any like efficient technical practice should go quickly, but it's small and you have to do it consistently, every day or every other day, whatever your goals are.
Mm-hmm.
So
I would say that for, I think, both of our sessions is that consistency is really the key to creating the long-term effects of what we have noticed that our processes and methods have allowed people to do.
Yeah.
And that you maintain that consistency and stick with it, and you will see the results between both of the processes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I said, I only do I do like 5 to 8 minutes of tone work a day, and I'm good to go. So it's wonderful.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna, because of our time, and I want to just be able to answer any questions that anyone has, or we want to be able to answer any questions. If anyone wants to take a quick picture of this for goals and next step, this is just a way for you to think about, how am I doing my technique routine? Do I want to change it up a bit and give these tools a try? And then you can do that. So I'll leave that up. And I'm going to, so yeah, thank you so much. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. But I would actually love to open it up for questions at this point, if that's okay.
If anyone has a question, feel free to either raise your hand with the reactions bar, it's on the main bar, or if you're more comfortable to just type in the chat, feel free to do so, and we can answer any burning questions you guys have.
Can you do the chromatic scale in 2? So the grouping that I did, is that correct? Is that what you're looking for, is the group that I did? Okay, so I did it in, the group is 3s. So I'm gonna hold the first one, 1, 2, 3, 1. Yeah, you're welcome. Could we post the PDFs again? Would you mind doing that, Jet?
Sure thing.
Thank you so much. Oh,
you're welcome.
Thank you, Lois. Glad this was an informative session for you.
Yeah.
Yes, for someone just sent a direct message. This is recorded, so it will be available on YouTube if you ever want to go back. Okay, tone production is dependent on body position, how one positions the tongue and throat. Have either of you found best practices for those issues?
Ooh,
yeah.
That's a great question. I don't think personally for me, I really spent a lot of time diving into tongue and throat because I try to keep everything pretty neutral inside my body cavity. So I'm not sure exactly what specific issues have come up. Do you have any thoughts based on your experience?
Yeah, so I've had a number of injuries in my life. So body awareness is really important to me, and Stefania was actually really gentle and thoughtful of that when working on tone with me. Because I've gone through a lot of different things. I don't want to say there's a best practice for it because our bodies are different, and that sounds like just a common thing that people say, but it's very much true. Our embouchure setups, our neck lengths are different, our arm lengths are different. I mean, all of this has an impact. The questions that I find really helpful are, what do I hear? And how am I physically feeling? And how do those two things line up? So for example, I used to, at one point I had an upper lip tremor, and because I blew down a lot and it overworked it and I couldn't do it anymore. So I had to figure out a different way to play. And Stefania really helped me with those questions, and we found a sound that I was going for, but I realized, oh, I'm using my upper lip too much. So I had to make some adjustments with my head joint placement. And when I did that, I was able to actually achieve the sound I wanted still, but blowing across in a different way that didn't require as much force. So I guess my best practice again is just kind of like let your body tell you what's working and what isn't working. Like I know the ideas of like open your throat a lot is a really common way. There was a whole presentation done at NFA this year that I went to that talked about vibrato, and that was brought up. I don't do that because for me that's not comfortable. I'm still going for an openness, but I can't think about it specifically here. But for some people, that really works for them, and it does create the sound they're looking for, and they can do it comfortably. So I'm not trying to like get around the question, but I feel like there can be a lot of, I have a lot more questions about your question and maybe where things are coming from. And yeah, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I would say that, your comfortability when playing is the, driving force behind your work on your long tones. So if something is uncomfortable, you've got to really assess what is discomforting and what can I do that's either opposite or different to see if that takes it away, or if it changes it, makes it better, and kind of explore how that works in a way that's going to be safe. As far as tongue and throat issues, I'm sure there are some teachers or professionals that you could reach out to that might have more experience specifically working in those areas or teaching in those areas, that might be able to give you some guidance. But really, I would just listen to your body. Try different things and see if it's better or worse. If it's worse, definitely don't do it. But if it makes it better and it's very comfortable, continue with that.
Gail asked a question. What harmonics exercises do you use for maintenance?
Yeah, so for harmonics, I don't really use them much for maintenance. I use them as kind of a grounding between my registers. So for instance, if I'm going between the low register and the middle register, I'll use the low D and I'll use a harmonic to see if things are in tune between the registers. So I'll play like kind of my personal assessment, which is going to be a low D and then a harmonic D, middle D, and then a regular middle D. And then I just assess between the harmonic middle D and the real fingering middle D to assess, is that the placement I want? I really use harmonics to make sure that my alignment is where I want it for the flute. Because if it's slightly off, that harmonic, which should be pretty well in tune on its own, if it's not in tune, then my alignment's not set up. So building my stability in the middle range is gonna change. So harmonics can be a good tool to strengthen between ranges, and I definitely recommend Trevor Wise Tone Book 1. There are some exercises in there that are pretty simple where you just kind of jump between different harmonics. So that would be a great resource for harmonics, but I don't use them a whole lot.
I have one that I like.
Yeah, please share.
Those are great. The one that I like is you're just going to use the fundamental, the octave, and then the next harmonic, so the fifth. And if I label them low, middle, high, I go low, middle, high, middle, high. So it sounds like this. And sometimes I'll add a diminuendo at the end just to work on airspeed and lip flexibility that I did in my long tones.
Yeah.
So I got that one from a band director. It was great. Let's see. Other questions. Oh, I'm so appreciative of all the comments in here. Let's see. Richard has asked, for fast passages in the third octave, when do you give up on standard fingerings and use harmonics, trill fingerings instead? Ooh, that's a great question. We talk a lot about real fingerings because our first teacher was really big about teaching us those, which we were so grateful for. And as we've gotten older, we've explored some of the other fingerings. I think for just like general technique practice, if you're working on just improving your technique, use the standard fingerings, because they really just can be helpful in developing the technique. They tend to have a better tone quality. They tend to be, the pitch is generally better. But there are absolutely times where I use the trill and harmonic fingerings. So what I do is I go through the four foundational tools, like really, really hardcore. And I start with the real fingerings. And then if I get to a point where, I've spent a couple weeks of process on them and it's just not working, then I'm more open to exploring some of the easier fingerings. I know on, what did I play? Chantelinos, Andre Jolivet's Chantelinos, which is just like wildly crazy technique at specific parts. I could not, I couldn't do it all in real fingerings. I tried, I really did. And I went through my process for a couple months actually. And I eventually just used some trill fingerings and it was fine. So, that's kind of I guess that doesn't totally answer your question. That's part of your own exploration. It might be part of your timeline depending on the, when do you have to perform said thing. Which I do want to say a quick note on etudes. We often try to learn etudes in a week. I think it's okay to take multiple weeks. If you really want to get some good technique development out of etudes, there can be a benefit, of course, to learning repertoire quickly. But if your goal of that etude is to just like work on a specific key signature or intervallic pattern or something, like give yourself 2 or 3 weeks to do your one note per clicks, to do your I am going homes. Spend 3 to 5 days doing just I am going homes, and then you can spend 6 days doing note grouping and maybe slowly running through it. I feel like sometimes we push our way through etudes just for the sake of like checking a box off as fast as possible, rather than like, what am I actually trying to learn from this? So I did, the Hughes etudes are wonderful. I'm gonna put those in the chat if you don't know them. The Hughes 40 etudes. Is it? Yeah, it's like 40 etudes, something like that. They're on IMSLP for free. And I spent a year and a half going through those etudes. And it was a little bit more than a week. But on the earliest ones, I was spending like 3 or 4 weeks on an etude just to really go through it. And then by the end, I was learning repertoire so fast because I had really developed the foundation of my technique. Yay, Mark, I'm glad you've heard of them. They're so good. Professor Richard Sherman here at MSU introduced them to us, and we really love them. Let's see.
Carlotta has said, stress and anxiety show up by tightening my throat. I find warming up with singing and playing is an excellent method to relax the throat. Mm-hmm. I have heard of this tool in terms of relaxing the throat. I have used it before, and it definitely does have an impact on kind of how things feel, but I personally don't have a lot of throat tension that I notice. I don't have my own experience with this. So I'm not sure what the best method is, other than to just sit with the long tone, sit with the low D, or lowest comfortable note if it's not the low D, and just kind of finding other ways also, other than singing and playing, to kind of figure out, is there something specific that is engaging that tension or that anxiety, and kind of using long tones as a tool to extrapolate what is happening in those moments, to see if there's other ways that you can go around that as well.
Mm-hmm. The one thing with stress, this is kind of more into like body mapping, Alexander technique, Feldenkrais, just general body awareness practices. I've studied a little bit, but I'm not a trained practitioner. But one thing that I found helpful in those is noticing at what point does the stress and anxiety show up. So is it how I'm bringing up my flute? Like, am I already setting myself up in a way that is, there's tension somewhere? Or is this fine, but when I take my breath, that's where the stress and, the tension comes in. So just kind of noticing, or is it like outside stress of my life is coming into flute playing, and then kind of working through the mental challenges and of that. Because I think Carlotta's right, like it can show up in our bodies in different ways. So I think personally, I like to find just where in my life, like, why is that coming up? Mm-hmm. And then trying to kind of get to the root of that, so that I can just, play.
Yeah, so that is not a continuing issue through your playing life.
Yeah. I know you might want to look up the research on, there is the research video from NFA on vibrato. They did talk about the effects of singing and playing. I don't want to speak to their research, but check it out. It was really interesting. I remember them just mentioning something about duration and like not doing it too long. But check it out, because I know it's been helpful for a lot of people in terms of relaxing their throat.
Do you know the names of the researchers?
Oh, that is a great question. I don't, but no, it's not going to come. But I know there's not a lot of flute research done on flute and like how vibrato is produced. If you type in flute and vibrato, I'm sure there are some videos that might come up or something. If you really want to know, shoot me an email. Send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat. And I know I have... Yes! Erica Boyson. Thank you so much. Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
I think I may have seen someone raise their hand. Did someone else have a question that we didn't get to? Oh, Susan put a lot of Hughes etudes in Patrick's Phil Zug's chunking book. Yes, that is the chunking book yes, they have all of the Hughes in there.
One final question that I read that we might have missed is Lauren asked, is there some advice on getting back to the basics?
Can you expand on that, Lauren, for us in any way? If you're comfortable doing so. I guess we can just talk about like, how would you go back to it?
Yeah.
If you haven't done the basics in a while, like how would we start?
I would just say just start doing it. I mean, with long tones for the tone work, really just starting with the lowest comfortable note. And I do want to emphasize that lowest comfortable, because as James mentioned, he originally started on middle B, and I was encouraging him to get to the lower register, and we tried, but it was not stable or comfortable, and we had to work our way down. So, starting where you're comfortable, both like you feel good about the sound, it feels comfortable on your face, your body feels comfortable with the playing, and then exploring your way down to that low D, and then working on intonation, embouchure, any resources. As far as intonation and embouchure, intonation, you can always work with just kind of listening to your sound and developing what you hear. You can also do drone work is also a great option. I recommend getting a drone. I have a tuner that also has a drone option so I can have it sound, and I'd recommend doing like a unison note with that. So if I'm working on the low D, I'll do the low D and also a drone at a D, and kind of see, can I match the pitch, and kind of explore where are things sharp, where are things flat, how do I develop that sound using those drones in a private space where you're alone.
Can you explain what a drone is?
Oh yeah, a drone is just going to be a pitch that's playing, so it's just going to be a long as we were doing those long tone D exercises, but it's just either the internet probably has one, tuners have
I can be
them.
your drone.
Yeah, you can have a
We'll
friend be
do
your
it.
drone. So James will
How
be
about a
my
G?
drone, and then
I'll do a G.
a G. Okay, so he's gonna play a G, and then I'll do an exercise where can help you learn about some intonation or develop your skills in intonation.
Oh.
So
And the drone doesn't change.
yeah,
That's
the drone
that's
just
why you're
stays.
doing it. It holds a steady pitch for you to play around with.
So I did some with James playing the drone, where it's just one note that's playing just the note, no additional notes, not a chord, and it doesn't change. It can stop if it's a friend who has to breathe, and then you play the same note. You can adjust whether or not you're sharp or flat. I'm hoping it came across. I was adjusting, going sharp, going flat, matching the drone to kind of assess where is sharp, where is flat, where is matching the drone, and creating that overtone, because that's where you can hear those overtones really well. But that can be a way of working on those intonation without necessarily using a tuner and being on the green. You could also, if you have access to a piano, you could hold the long piano, which I believe is the
Far right.
right foot, right pedal, and press your note and then play along with it. Or if you have friends that you can play with, whether they play the flute or not, it doesn't have to be a flute player, just anyone who can play the same pitch. And then you can alternate between who is doing the drone and who is doing the pitch alteration to kind of help you hear other people play different intonation tendencies, or you experiencing those different intonation tendencies in your playing. As far as embouchure, embouchure is pretty subjective because everyone has a different setup with lips. Like James and I talked a lot about how I have very thin lips, which I had never really thought about, but he has a thicker lower bottom lip, and so talking about embouchure can be tricky, and giving resources can be tricky.
I have an idea though.
You have an idea.
I teach a lot of beginners, and I work with the flute methods class at Michigan State, so I teach future band directors how to teach. So if you're really feeling like, oh, basics, like that's where I really want to start, grab your head joint. Start there. It's totally fine. I sometimes still do it. And I like to think of like just blowing a fast, tiny airstream, maybe like blow out a birthday candle, or like on some hot soup, and then just bringing the head joint up and fiddling around with it. Until you find where it rings the most for you. So doing that, and then just you can always close the end and do some low and high, some flexibility. Just working on your lower lip movement, making sure you can feel that control. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of the technique, just do really slow scales. Pick your favorite scale every day. Do 1 octave or a 5-note scale. Mm-hmm. Do it 1 note per click. And just feel comfortable moving those fingers again. And then play a piece for fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, as much as we want to develop all the things and we encourage you to put in your time on the fundamentals, go do something fun as well, because that's really important to playing.
Yeah. I think when you're trying to get into any sort of fundamental, these methods can help you kind of get a starting point for where you want to go. the nice thing is you get to set your goals, you get to set your pace, you get to decide what your sound is, what your comfortability is, and all of that stuff, because in the practice room it's just you and you get to do what you want in there. So, you know, you have the freedom to do what you would like.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, I think we're all done with questions. Thank you so much to our amazing co-hosts, Stefania and James. I hope everyone learned a lot about tone and technique and ready to incorporate in your practice. So thank you so much for this amazing presentation. And I think that is all we have for you all. Please stay tuned next week for our next installment in this NFA virtual series. We will love to have you. And until then, have a happy rest of your Sunday.